Hi, thank you so much for joining the group. For joining the newsletter. And I'm so excited to start teaching you about how to start reading intuitively and listening to yourself and really trusting yourself when it comes to reading tarot because I feel like that's the hardest part is you want to take control of your reading practice. You want to take control of your life, but at the same time, you don't know how. It didn't Tarot can be intimidating because there's so many different decks and symbols. So we're going to talk about the difference right now between intuitive and systematic reading because the biggest misconception when it comes to tarot, for example, we're looking at the Ten of Pentacles here, is that you need to come in and you need to know the keywords and the planetary alignments and the numerology and everything behind a card by the book, and it can't mean anything different. And that's just not true because we all are individuals and our cards are individuals in a way. That's why part of my start reading tarot intuitively course goes over how to interview your deck, um, because it does have its own personality. But for this card specifically, let's take a look at this and look at it systematically. So just looking at it, obviously this deals with happiness and completion because it's a 10. All the 10s of tarot deal with completion. And that's just going also from a numerology standpoint. Um, Obviously, it deals with generations because we have a baby, we have an elderly man, and then we have a couple. And there's stability and structure because of the house in the background behind the couple. It deals with earth because, of course, pentacles, and grass and underneath an oak tree. And this is just looking at if I were to write down all the correspondences and symbols for a card, that's what I'm doing here, is I'm just looking at it. But there's so much more to this card than just listing off the keywords like, oh, you will meet your financial goals, you will be stable, you don't have to worry about any material needs, and you'll be able to procreate and have a happy family. That's decent for a reading, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you can get so much deeper because all about reading intuitively is going based off of your own life experiences, what your intuition is telling you about the card. And my intuition for this card springs to mind the happiest family moments I've ever had in my life. So spending anniversary, like my grandparents' anniversary with my entire family, which is their mini version of Christmas. Um, because my grandmother's a Jehovah's Witness, they don't celebrate any of that. So we would get together for their anniversary and we'd go out to dinner and have presents and watch movies and just be together. Another image that springs to mind is when my husband and I first moved in together before we actually got engaged. Um, we lived in a tiny little apartment. It was warm, it was cozy, and we had taco nights and we watched musicals and we'd sit for hours next to each other at the computer, at this computer actually, while I played The Sims. And we'd play Diablo and happy moments like that. We'd have Thanksgiving and have friends over and decorate the tree, and just that happy image that comes to mind that usually in a movie, a musical montage would be playing. Moments like that. And that's what everyone imagines their life to be. You have your perfect home and stability in mind when it comes to financial independence and wealth and abundance. And that's what this card's all about. It's supposed to bring to mind that happy family. If you didn't have to pay for anything, not worry about any kind of bills, that's the image that springs to mind. And that is reading intuitively. Because as soon as that card comes up in a reading, you're like, oh, I know exactly what you're thinking about, what you want, because I've been there and I want it too. You know what I mean? So we're going to look at a couple other cards just to give some variety here. So to backtrack, well, not to backtrack, but to give a different mood, we're going to look at the Three of Swords. Now, systematically, we're going to look at this again. Swords deals with the element of air, which is all about intellectual communication. It's one of the fast elements. Fire and air are fast. So for timelines, this would be weeks. So 3 weeks specifically, if we wanted to go off of that. Um, but obviously, it deals with incredible amounts of pain because it's not just one little heartache, it's a bunch because you're getting stabbed in the heart. And there's a spiritual aspect and a mystical aspect because there's some fairies. And obviously, there's this sense of falling and depression because of all the symbols in the cards. It's dreary, it's gloomy, it doesn't look happy. And that's just from looking at the symbols. Now, obviously, the Three of Swords, going off of the book that came with the Witch's Tarot, which is what these cards are from, um, it says that if you do not, and I'm not looking at the book, I'm just trying to remember, it's going more for if you don't accept the hurt that has happened to you and all the trauma, you're never going to get over it because you can walk around with these three swords in your chest for the rest of your life, but you have to first accept that they're there and then start healing from it, start taking them out. And that's just systematically looking at this. Intuitively, I'm remembering the first time I was ever cheated on, where I was in a relationship and this guy was in love. He kept telling me he was in love with like 7 other girls, but he loved me the best. That's why he was with me. It makes me think of stupid relationships in high school where it constantly hurts me. It makes me think of a toxic relationship that I was in where I would lay there and let this guy do whatever he wanted to me, physically, emotionally, mentally, anything, because I loved him. But he was imagining another woman's face on my face. He didn't want me, he wanted her. But I was just a placeholder. And it took a long time for me to accept that pain and start pulling those swords out. But as soon as I did, it hurt even more. The hardest I cried was telling him, I think we need to break up. I broke down. I couldn't deal with it anymore. So when I see this card, it reminds me of how hard that hurt. And the pain that the person I'm reading for is probably going through. Because I've been there. So you can relate. My intuition is springing to mind these images of hurt that I've gone through. And the first thing that comes to mind, especially if this is for a love reading, and someone is asking, will we be together forever? And then this card comes up, it's your heart hurts. Not in this three, not getting stabbed kind of way, but it gets heavy because you have to tell them there's a pain coming and it's gonna hurt when you separate, but it'll be for the better kind of thing. So let's look at another card. Next one. All right, we're gonna get this Nine of Swords. Now, if I really want to get systematic with this, the reason why I picked this, the Nine of Swords, in the original Rider-Waite deck, was based off of Romeo and Juliet, and you hear me mention this a lot because Rider-Waite was based off of a lot of Shakespearean plays. And this card stands out the most to me because it's Romeo and Juliet. And it's Juliet after she takes the belladonna, I believe it's belladonna, and puts herself in a coma for 2 days so she can be with Romeo forever. From an outsider point of view, you're like, girl, why? There are other fish in the sea. Paris is not that bad. If you actually read the play, he's not that bad. He's actually a genuinely nice guy, and he wants to take care of you. But he's not Romeo. And so originally, just from looking at the meanings of this, because you were so concerned with what's going on in your head, because it's swords again, air, that you're not seeing the moon outside and seeing that symbolically the moon sheds light on situations in a different way. What looks one way in the light isn't the same as in the dark, you know. And that's just going along also with the Witch's Tarot, this guidebook, especially the description for the moon is like that. Things don't always look the same in the light as they do in the dark. Um, so taking that symbol and then taking that she's literally laying there like dramatic, oh, woe is me, it makes me think of someone incredibly dramatic. They're a teenager and they just threw themselves on the bed because they're done. um, or a toddler just, having a fit. But then I also think of those moments, and that's just systematically, but I intuitively I think of those moments of holding myself up in my room when I was a teenager, doing nothing but listening to poetry, burning candles, and blasting Evanescence. Things like that. Um, so I get that dramatic moment where at the time it hurts and you don't know any other way to express it than to hold yourself up and let your mind race. Is it best in the long run? No, but it is kind of a coping mechanism. So reading intuitively also lets you understand what's going on. It lets you relate to what the client is going through. So if you see this card, systematically the first thing that pops in my mind is, oh, I have a drama queen here. But then I think back to I was once that. I was once a drama queen. Um, and it's really not that bad to feel that way because it's your way of coping through it. And yes, you may be holding up because the swords are going across the window symbolically, so you don't want to see the darker side of the situation you're in. You don't want to see that your boyfriend is a piece of shit. You don't want to see that your boss is purposely not giving you your full paycheck because he's sleazy or she's sleazy. You don't want to see that your best friend's girlfriend is hitting on you because then that means that she's not faithful and that makes you angry. You don't want to see it. You just want to hole yourself up in your room, drink a bottle of something, blast some Slipknot, and just melt away into the background. Sometimes that happens. So, last card, and I know all of these are so cheery, but it's important. Okay, so the Witch's Tarot um, replaces the devil with the shadow side. It has two cards it replaces. It replaces the devil with the shadow side and the Hierophant with the high priest. So for this card, it takes a different take. The devil, going based off of just systematically and keywords, it's going more for addiction and being in a situation that you can easily get out of, because the traditional imagery has the guy with the horns and two people chained, but he's not holding the chain and they're not chained to anything. They could leave at any time. It's kind of an Eight of Swords where you can leave at any time, but it's more expanded. It's more dramatic. Um, for the shadow side, you see these two people, they are literally running from the monster. They don't want to confront it. And the book gives a definition for this card for you need to face your fears. You need to face the situation that you don't want to deal with head on, because that's the only way it's going away. It just wants to talk, it wants you to confront it, and it wants you to have a Five of Wands moment where you fight it. Because that's the only way you're going to get past it instead of hiding, because you're obviously hiding from something like the girl behind the tree. If you want to take this more symbolically, also looking at systematic symbols for tarot, um, there's light where the monster is. It's trying to shine the light, and these two people, they're hiding from it. One guy's blinded by it because he doesn't want to see the truth. It probably, literally blindsided him. And the chick sees it and she's dodging it. She doesn't want to see the light of the situation. She doesn't want to see it in its actual context. She would rather be in fear and manipulated and run away than anything else. So, that's systematic. Just going off the symbols, off of what's going on in the card. But intuitively. not only am I creating a scene, like I kind of have been for all these cards, I'm creating a scene on what is going on with these characters, but I'm bringing into my life moments where I have run away from the beast and I didn't want to confront it. Like, I grew up with a toxic parent who was partly mental health issues, and the other part was she's very expressive, but she didn't express things in the best way because her brain was all over the place. She was bipolar. And so those days where I would literally feel like I'm running because I wouldn't talk. I didn't talk for a long time. I was the quietest person in my very loud house, even if I was very loud myself, because there were some times where I would literally shut down and I wasn't allowed to talk. I wasn't allowed to say anything and just stand there and take it. And I almost tried running away. I literally tried to, and then I got locked up for trying to run away. And everybody could see it wasn't me. That was the problem. They could understand. And so I've been in that girl's shoes in the picture where I was running. But the difference is you have to have that moment where you stand up in the light and you say, back off. And I did that. I've done that a couple times. And you put your foot down and it's hard. You're still terrified. And you still feel the after effects and the trauma of it. But at the same time, it's better to stand up and acknowledge the side you're running away from, the shadow side, than continue living in fear. Because you're not yourself when you're afraid. So this card comes up in a reading, I totally get it. It's a toxic person. It's you're in a relation with a relationship with somebody who because of sexual chemistry. It's like that song Fight for All the Wrong Reasons by Nickelback. You're there literally because you're good in bed. But besides that, you fight and you hurt each other. Um, it's going to a job where everyone is toxic and cliquey and hates you, but you go because you need the money, things like that. So that's just a little bit introduction to the difference between and systematic reading. So leave me a comment, shoot me an email, with questions, and do the newsletter. See